This is a poem that is one of my favorite poems. This is a Donald Hall poem. It is the best poem about work horses that I think has ever been written. I have a hard time getting through this one, so forgive me if I start sobbing. There's nothing so unbecoming as a podium sob, particularly over your own work. We have there's a poet in Lincoln who gave a reading a number of years ago. He's a very old man and retired, but he gave a reading some years ago and spent most of his time sobbing and crying and beating the podium with his fists. And all of us were trying to be respectful. Names of horses. All winter your brute shoulders strained against collars, padding and steer hide over the ash hains to haul sledges of cordwood to dry through spring and summer, for the Glenwood stove next winter and for the simmering rains. In April you pulled cartloads of manure spread on the fields, dark manure, Holsteins, and knobs of your own clustered with oats. All summer you mowed the grass in meadow and hayfield, the mowing machine clacketing beside you while the sun walked high in the morning. In afternoon's heat, you pulled a clawed rake through the sand acres gathering stacks, and dragged the wagon from stack to stack and the built hay rack back uphill to the chaffy barn. 3 loads of hay a day from standing grass in the morning. Sundays you trotted the 2 miles to church with the light load of a leather quarter-top buggy and grazed in the sound of hymns. Generation on generation, your neck rubbed the windowsill of the stall, smoothing the wood as the sea smooths glass. When you were old and lame, when your shoulders hurt, bending to graze, one October the man who fed you and kept you and harnessed you every morning led you through corn stubble to sandy ground above Eagle Pond and dug a hole beside you where you stood shuddering in your skin, and laid the shotgun's muzzle in the boneless hollow behind your ear and fired the slug into your brain and felled you into your grave, shoveling sand to cover you, setting goldenrod upright above you, where by next summer a dent in the ground made your monument. For 150 years, in the pasture of dead horses, roots of pine trees pushed through the pale curves of your ribs. Yellow blossoms flourished above you in autumn, and in winter frost heaved your bones in the ground. Old toilers, soil makers, Bo, Roger, Mackerel, Riley, Ned, Nellie, Chester, Lady Ghost. You know, Willa Cather got a lot of capital out of the Great Plains, but she really wasn't very happy with the Great Plains. You know, she took off and went to the east to live. And you know, I was looking this morning at this old book of poems of hers. We don't think of Cather as being much of a poet, and but here's a sort of a kind of an odd thing. It's called Prairie Dawn. A crimson fire that vanquishes the stars, a pungent odor from the dusty sage, a sudden stirring of the huddled herds, a breaking of the distant tablelands through purple mist ascending, and a flare of water ditches silver in the light. A swift, bright lance hurled low across the world, a sudden sickness for the hills of home. So Willa Cather must have gotten homesick at some point. You never knew. You know? Henry Taylor won a Pulitzer for poetry in 1986, I think, maybe. He's was raised among horses. His Pulitzer Prize book was called The Flying Change, which is about a thing that the running horses can do. I never quite understood it, but some of you may. But this is a poem called The Hay Fork, which I like very much. It deals with story in a really interesting way, the way people keep story alive. I could get up from this kitchen table, I think, and go see for myself whether even now, in the worn planks of the old barn floor, there might be 2 holes I saw made there 40 years ago, in a single second along the ponderous timeline of farming. Well, I might get over there one of these days. Meanwhile, what can I see from here? We entered the barn's second story through a big sliding door at the top of an earthen ramp. There was a hay mow on either side of a wagon-wide aisleway. A rail under the ridgepole ran gable to gable. High in the dark far end, when I was a boy, the old hay fork still hung there, barely visible in cobwebs and thin strips of sunlight that burst between weathering boards. Shaped like a 3-foot inverted U, a giant staple, it rusted toward absolute darkness, against which stark blobs left by last season's mud wasps stood out like white spots on a heifer. Who knew how long it had been there? Loose hay was giving way to bales before I was born. Though here and there I've seen it made, the teams of workhorses pulling the loadering wagon, a man with a pitchfork working everyday magic on top of the rack, the slow ride to the barn, drawing the load up under the rail and the trip stop. A man dragged the fork down, hauling against the tow rope's weight the 40 pounds of steel with 2 barbed ends that grabbed the wads of hay. Then the team, unhitched from the wagon, pulled on the tow rope, moving away from the barn, lifting the hay toward the roof. A click as the trolley hook caught, then the hay rode back along the rail into the mow where men forked it away for the winter. So to a day when I was 12 or 13, when the baled hay we were making was plentiful, stacked in the mow almost up to the roof. And we were standing around in the aisleway after the wagon backed out, catching breath, getting ready to go back in the field. One man up in the mow took a notion and snatched at the tag end of the rope still fastened to the hay fork. So it whirred down the track to a place just above the middle of the aisleway, hit the trip, and dropped. All faster it seemed than the noise of the track could make us look up, and plunged its 2 points into the floor beside the left foot of Joe Trammell, who stood there, leaning away from it, looking down and then up and around at all of us, a barn full of men, struck reverently silent in the presence of whatever it was. The good luck that kept Joe from injury, the bad luck that gave him his worst scare in years, the innocent thoughtlessness that led to that yank on the rope. The way things can go for years without happening, biding their time in a dust-whirling, cobwebby barn I can see and smell and hear right now, staring down at the grain in the wood in this kitchen table. One by Maxine Kuhn, and I'll end with one by me. Maxine Kuhn also lives in New England and is a marvelous poet, but also has raised horses for many years. Wonderful person. And up the road, she had a hermit living, Henry Manley, and wrote a number of poems about Henry. This is from her Pulitzer book, Upcountry. Hello, hello, Henry. My neighbor in the country, Henry Manley, with a washpot warming in his wood stove, with a heifer and 2 goats and yearly chickens, has outlasted Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill, but something's stirring in him in his dotage. Last fall he dug a hole and moved his privy, and a year ago in April reamed his well out. When the county sent a truck and poles and cable, his daddy ran the lineman off with birdshot and swore he'd die by oil lamp, and did. Now you tell me that all day yesterday in Boston, you set your city phone at mine, and had it ringing inside a dead apartment for 3 hours, room after empty room, to keep yours busy. I hear it in my head, that ranting summons. That must have been about the time that Henry walked up 2 miles, shy as a girl, come calling, to tell me he has a phone now, 264, ringing 2. It rang 1 time last week, wrong number. He'd be pleased if one day I would think to call him. Hello, Henry, is that you? One by me. I mentioned the mother's family lived in northeastern Iowa. A number of years ago, I was in Cedar Rapids visiting her and was told that one of her first cousins was dying up at Denver, Iowa, which is the town where my grandparents lived, in a nursing home, and that if I wanted to see him, I should go up there and visit him. So I called that day and made an appointment and drove up, and they had him out in the visiting room, all cleaned up, hair combed and wet from combing, and brand new plaid shirt on, and in his wheelchair. They were very glad to see me. He had a very pronounced black age spot on his left hand that has been getting bigger over the years, and that figures in this poem. But a lot of what I do with my work is to try to keep these people alive. That memoir that I wrote that I mentioned, Lights on the Ground of Darkness, was very much intended to make a lot of very ordinary people stay alive a little bit longer. If somebody reads that book, as one hopes they would, that up into the light come all those ancestors of mine who were very ordinary people. And that's why I encourage everybody to write about family, because you write a few lines on a yellow legal pad and stick them in a drawer or an envelope or whatever, and someday somebody will come along and pick those up and read them, and that uncle or aunt of yours will come right back up into their life for a little while. A goodbye handshake. Though you and the nursing home are miles behind me now, your hand with its dark blue age spots is here in my hand. Your fingers warm from all the hot steel handles they held in your 88 years. Levers of threshing machines, of sickle barn mowers and balers, but cooling now and slowly going all blue-black over brown, like a pool of blue oil on the floor of a barn. That darkness working its way up into the cuff of your new plaid shirt, up past your elbow, sharp as a plowshare, there on the wheelchair armrest, easing over your heart like a shadow. 100 miles down the road, stopped by the highway, and sitting in shade at the edge of a shimmering cornfield, I say goodbye. I am headed both farther and further than you, Iowa free line. With love, I take your blue-black hand, which has held nearly everything once, and has squeezed it shyly and politely. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.